She didn't cry when her mother-in-law punched her. She wiped the blood off her face with the tablecloth and walked out of the mansion without saying a word. That night, Valerie vanished from their world. What came next? No one saw coming. Would you have walked away? Or fought back? Tell us below. I always thought silence could protect me. But that night, in front of 100 glittering smiles, silence shattered me. The clinking of crystal and polished laughter floated through the ballroom like artificial perfume, sweet, expensive, and suffocating. I drifted through the Worthington estate as if I were invisible, balancing a tray of wine flutes, careful not to make a sound that might remind anyone I existed. Beneath the warm lighting and lush centerpieces, I was simply background noise. That was my role, and I'd learned to play it well. But as I passed Evelyn's circle, her hand-picked orbit of donors, old money friends, and one former senator, I caught her eye. That cold flicker of recognition, the one that said, "You are tolerated, not welcomed." She didn't speak, just curled her lips in a smile so tight it sliced. I dipped my head and moved on, but the echo of her wedding day whisper returned uninvited. "You'll never belong here, no matter how hard you try." I gripped the tray tighter. 6 years. 6 years of folded hands and shallow breaths of excusing myself before speaking of turning pain into polite smiles. I convinced myself that being quiet meant being safe. But tonight, that silence betrayed me. It happened in less than 2 seconds. A shoulder brush, a shift in balance, and the glass in my hand tilted just slightly. A thin ribbon of red wine spilled onto Evelyn's white custom Dior hand-stitched imported a year in the making. The kind of dress you don't wear. You display it. The tray clattered. The conversation didn't so much stop as evaporate. Evelyn looked down at her ruined dress. Her gaze crawled up to meet mine, flat and glacial. Then, with precision no doubt honed from decades of control, she curled her fist and struck me across the face. Gasps didn't follow. There were none. Just silence. I staggered sideways. My cheek burned and a metallic taste spread across my tongue. The marble floor gleamed beneath me, suddenly unfamiliar. Blood dripped from the corner of my mouth onto the stone, dark and quiet. No one moved. Not the guests. Not the waitstaff. Not even Graham. I turned to him silently, begging, praying for something: shock, concern, anger. Anything human. But his eyes didn't search mine. They looked past me like I was an inconvenience standing between him and his next glass of champagne. "Apologize to my mother," he said, calm and cold. "Then leave." For a heartbeat, I couldn't hear the room. Only my breath. Then the sound of a violin restarting too early, too cheerful. I reached for the table, grabbed the edge of the ivory cloth, and wiped my mouth slowly. My blood left a muted stain. I folded the corner of the cloth as if closing a wound. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I didn't scream. I straightened, turned away, and walked out. No one followed. Outside the estate gates, the cold March air hit my skin like a rebuke. I sucked in a breath so deep it ached, but no one noticed. For the first time in years, no one's watching me. And that terrifies me more than it frees me. They said, "Don't make a scene." But they already did, and it left a bruise. The door clicked shut behind me, and the silence of my old apartment hit like a wall. I hadn't stepped foot here in nearly 5 years, but the scent of cinnamon cleaner and secondhand books lingered like no time had passed. I stood in the entryway holding my breath as if the room might reject me. It didn't. It just waited. The only light came from the city glow beyond the blinds, casting long shadows across the walls. I dropped my bag by the couch and kicked off my heels, the same pair Evelyn said made my legs look acceptable if you ignore the calves. I winced. Not from the bruise on my face, but the memory of her voice syrupy with venom. A charity project with a degree she once cooed to a senator's wife. And I smiled because what else was I supposed to do? The silence broke with the buzz of my phone vibrating against the counter. I walked over and flipped it face up. 53 missed calls. Graham, Evelyn, Mom Worthington, Cousin Lee, and an unknown number I didn't recognize. The messages rolled in like waves. "You're overreacting. She was just startled. You embarrassed her. Please don't ruin this family over a moment. You knew what you were marrying into. Each one chipped away at something I hadn't realized I'd been holding together. The urge to reply, to explain, to be reasonable clawed at me. But I didn't touch the phone again. I just let it vibrate itself hoarse. The ticking clock above the kitchen sink was the only thing louder than the silence. I wandered into the bedroom. Dust floated through the air like a slow snowfall. On the shelf between an old Polaroid and a dried rose sat a cloth-bound journal I hadn't opened since moving into the Worthington estate. I pulled it down. The spine creaked like a protest. I flipped past empty pages until I found the first entry. She said, "I talk too loud when I laugh." Then he said I shouldn't wear flats, they make me look short and servicey. Page after page of small humiliations I had turned into forgettable anecdotes now scrawled like courtroom evidence. It wasn't a diary. It was a record. And tonight it felt like the only thing in this room that hadn't betrayed me. I don't know how long I sat there cross-legged on the rug, the journal spread open like a confession. The phone buzzed again. I ignored it. But then a new notification popped up. Email from Marla J. Subject: I saw what she did. I saved the footage. My breath caught. I clicked. The body of the email was just one line. Thought you might want this before they delete it. Below a video file, Worthington, Cam Hall, 03103, movie. Hands trembling, I opened it. There I was in the hallway tray, balanced smile tight. The wine tipping Evelyn turning and then the hit. My body snapped sideways, blood flicking into the air, the stunned faces of guests frozen in inaction. I hit pause. The image stayed on my face mid-fall. I stared at it. I'm not crazy. I whispered to the empty room. I wasn't overreacting. For a moment, my chest tightened, not from fear, but from something heavier. Relief. I stood and walked to the desk, brushing aside old mail and receipts until I found my laptop. I opened a browser. My fingers hovered over the keys. I typed, "Pro bono legal help for women New York." The screen filled with links. One stood out. McAllister Legal Advocacy Group, specializing in domestic abuse, wrongful dismissal, emotional harassment. I stared at the name glowing against the dark room, the bruise on my cheek pulsing like a reminder. Maybe silence wasn't safety. Maybe it was complicity. And maybe I was done with both. I've seen women like you before, Rosa said. They usually come in apologizing. You didn't. The office smelled like time. Old paper-faded carpet and coffee that had been microwaved one too many times. Valerie sat across from Rosa McAllister, her hands resting on a manila folder full of 6 years' worth of humiliation. She didn't fidget. She didn't smile. She just waited. Rosa leaned back in her creaky chair, watching Valerie with eyes that had seen too much. You didn't ask for tea, she said, not unkindly. Most people ask for tea. Or tissues. I didn't come to be comforted, Valerie replied. Good. Rosa nodded once, then gestured to the folder. Let's get to it. The story came out in pieces. The party, the punch, the silence. The years of subtle erasure. Valerie spoke with a calm that was almost eerie, like she was reading off someone else's medical chart. She paused only once when remembering something small but sharp. There was a night, maybe 2 years in, she said. I told Graham I was thinking about going back to work. Teaching, maybe. I missed it. And he laughed. Said, you don't need independence, you have me. Like it was romantic. Rosa didn't smile. Classic. Valerie handed over her journal first. Then her phone screenshots, voicemails, messages that started as concern and curdled into commands. Finally, the video. Rosa watched it in silence. When the screen froze on Evelyn's fist mid-swing, she exhaled slowly. That Rosa said is not going to go away with a PR statement. She spun her chair toward the filing cabinet and pulled out a standard authorization form. We're going to need more. The Worthingtons have lawyers who don't blink at a 6-figure retainer. But this video, it has weight. Your documentation adds structure. If we want to hold them accountable, we need a foundation and a crack. Valerie's phone buzzed. An email notification. She hesitated, then opened it. From Marla Jennings, subject. I used to work for Evelyn. The body was short. She fired me when I started asking questions about the foundation's tax filings. I couldn't prove it then, but I've kept copies, attached PDFs, budget discrepancies, donation misallocations, emails that hinted at something deeper than just bad bookkeeping. Valerie turned the screen toward Rosa. The older woman leaned in, scrolling with practiced precision. "This just got interesting," Rosa murmured. "She's brave, if she's real." "She's real," Valerie said. She was always polite at events, never quite smiled when Evelyn spoke. Rosa nodded, then stood. "Wait here." She disappeared into a back room. Valerie sat in the silence, surrounded by peeling linoleum, leaning towers of case files, and the faint hum of a copier that hadn't been serviced in years. When Rosa returned, she held a thin folder and a pen. She laid them on the table with a quiet gravity. "This is the first step. It gives me legal authority to act on your behalf, to request records, initiate inquiries, and protect you if it comes to that." Valerie stared at the line that read "Client Signature." Her hand didn't shake when she picked up the pen. She signed. Rosa took the form and placed it in a locked drawer. Then she opened her laptop and began scanning the documents Marla had sent. 2 minutes passed. Then Rosa stopped typing. "Oh, hell," she muttered. Valerie leaned in. "What is it?" Rosa turned the screen. On it, a scanned document with board member signatures approving a $2.5 million foundation fund transfer. "There," Rosa pointed. "That name. He's been dead for 6 years." The cursor hovered over the signature. It matched the others perfectly. "She forged it," Rosa whispered. "She forged all of them." The room felt colder. This wasn't just about a punch. Not anymore. Truth doesn't whisper. It crashes through polished doors in all caps. The email came at 2:14 a.m. Valerie hadn't been sleeping. She hadn't slept properly in days. The glow of her laptop screen had become more familiar than her own reflection. She clicked it open. From Marla Jennings, subject: "I think this is what you've been waiting for." Attached were scans, dozens of them. Internal memos from the Worthington Foundation, grant records that didn't align with tax filings, emails from Evelyn, authorizing transfers to non-existent entities. Valerie scrolled through them slowly, her breath shallow, heart tight. These weren't suspicions. They were facts. Proof. Names. Amounts. Instructions typed in Evelyn's clipped tone. Valerie stared at one file name: board. Approval meeting, SAO, March 2019. Forged. PDF. She whispered, "We have her." She forwarded everything to Rosa. 5 minutes later, her phone rang. "Meet me in the office," Rosa said. "Now." By sunrise, they were seated in Rosa's cluttered office, the air thick with legal adrenaline. Rosa had printed the files, highlighting key sections, paper-clipping them with surgical precision. "She forged over $1.2 million in phantom donations," Rosa said. "And those charities don't exist." We checked. They're just P.O. boxes tied to her cousin's trust. Valerie didn't flinch. "Then we go public." Rosa lifted her eyes. "You're sure she hit me in front of 100 people and tried to erase it? She's stolen from donors, lied to the government, and ruined lives. I'm done hiding." Rosa nodded slowly. "Okay then. We hit back not with fists, but facts." They compiled a packet of timeline excerpts of Valerie's journal, screenshots of messages, Marla's testimony, and the forged documents. Rosa arranged for it to be sent anonymously to 3 journalists known for investigative exposés. One from the Times, one from The Atlantic, and a freelancer who'd once unraveled a senator's corruption scandal. On March 20th, Valerie met Marla in person. They chose a quiet cafe in Brooklyn, the kind with frosted windows and jazz humming from old speakers. Marla wore a wool coat despite the warming weather eyes flicking to the door every few minutes. "Are you sure this is safe?" she asked as Valerie slid into the booth. "No," Valerie replied. "But we're doing it anyway." Marla opened her folder. She didn't just fake approvals. She redirected disaster relief funds during that storm in 2021. The state gave them $200K, it vanished. Valerie took a deep breath. "You did the right thing, Marla." "She ruined my career," Marla said softly, But if I stay quiet, I let her ruin more than that. Back at her apartment, Valerie's phone pinged again. A voicemail. She pressed play. Valerie, this is John Braxton. I sat on the board 2 years ago. I saw your name in the news and… Listen, I didn't know she was faking our signatures. I never approved those grants. Please. I can't be dragged into this. I have grandkids. Please. She replayed it. Twice. Then sent it to Rosa. The next morning, the article dropped. Bold headline, black and damning behind the Worthington Foundation class, cash and a culture of control. The story laid bare decades of manipulation cover-ups and financial misdeeds. It quoted anonymous insiders. It referenced legal documents. It mentioned a recent physical assault caught on tape. By noon, the Worthington family name trended for all the wrong reasons. That evening, a courier arrived at Valerie's door, legal envelope in hand. Rosa read the letter, brows lifting in quiet satisfaction. Defamation, she said. Slander. Evelyn suing. Valerie felt the fear rise for just a moment. Then Rosa smiled, slow and sharp. Perfect, she said. Now we bring everything to court. She built an empire on quiet obedience. And now silence is what's bringing it down. The city didn't sleep anymore. Not after the article. Not after the leaked footage. Paparazzi stalked the sidewalk outside Evelyn Worthington's gated estate, while reporters live-streamed from across the street speculating about fraud and foundations and family implosions. Hashtags exploded across social media like digital wildfire. Worthington lies. Stand with Valerie. Justice over bloodlines. And today, Valerie Hart was going on national television. She sat beneath the harsh lights of the morning show studio palms, cool against the coffee mug branded with the network's logo. Across from her sat the anchor, kind eyes, practiced concern. But Valerie didn't need sympathy anymore. She needed clarity. For the world. And for herself. I didn't come here to destroy a family, Valerie said when the questions began. But when a system protects its abusers, staying silent makes you part of the abuse. As the segment continued, they showed a blurred clip the moment Evelyn struck her. Gasps rippled through online audiences. Messages flooded in. Support, applause, even apologies from strangers who once envied the Worthington name. In Rosa's office, a monitor streamed the interview live. Rosa smiled without showing teeth. That's it, she muttered. Let them try to spin that. The next knock at Valerie's door came just past sunset. Graham. He looked thinner, as if shame had gnawed through his tailored exterior. He didn't hug her, just stood there, a man divided. You made your point, he said. But this public circus, it's destroying everything. The board's in chaos, the stock's slipping. Can't we settle quietly? Valerie tilted her head. Did you say sorry for letting her hit me? Or are you just sorry it's hurting the company? His silence was the answer. That night, a statement dropped from federal authorities. The FBI had opened an inquiry into the Worthington Foundation's finances. Hours later, Evelyn Worthington vanished. No press conference, no rebuttal. Just gone. Her final act, a $500,000 wire transfer to an untraceable overseas account. The following morning, Evelyn's name was plastered across every major news outlet. News anchors speculated on her sudden disappearance, wondering if the heiress of New York's most charitable dynasty had finally crossed a line that even her influence couldn't erase. Rosa didn't look surprised. She pored over new filings in her office red marker, circling discrepancies and dates. She's running, Rosa said simply. And that's exactly the behavior we need to show in court. It screams guilt. Valerie stood by the window of her apartment, watching the city breathe beneath her. Gone was the woman who used to flinch at Evelyn's stare, the woman who waited for Graham's approval like air. In her place was someone sharper, steadier. Someone dangerous, not because she could destroy reputations, but because she had nothing left to fear. Calls came in nonstop. Networks, advocates, women sharing their own stories. But amid the noise, one message stood out, a handwritten letter slid under her door with no return address. Inside a single line, "She did this to me too, I'll testify." Valerie folded the note, heart pounding. Every time they tried to intimidate her, the truth grew louder. Evelyn's power wasn't just eroding, it was imploding. Later that day, Graham was spotted leaving Worthington headquarters. Reporters shouted questions. He ignored them. His tailored suit couldn't mask the tremble in his steps. Rumors circulated, internal memos leaked, board members resigning, donors withdrawing pledges. Valerie didn't gloat. She just watched, quietly, because she knew silence had been their weapon, but now it was her evidence. In a conference room lined with legal pads and empty coffee cups, Rosa prepared her for what was next. Depositions, hearings, sworn testimony. "You're not just fighting for yourself anymore," Rosa said. "Are you ready?" Valerie looked at her. Calm, centered. "I've never been more ready." And in that still moment, amidst headlines and subpoenas, Valerie realized the empire Evelyn built wasn't crumbling because someone screamed. It was crumbling because someone finally refused to whisper. Evelyn disappears from public view. Her last known act wiring $500,000 overseas. They tried to bury me with shame. I grew into something they can't unsee. The emails kept coming. Interview requests, book deals, even a podcast called The Worthington Wreck. Valerie ignored them all. Her voice had already been heard not just by the world, but by herself. That was enough. On a quiet morning in April, she sat in her new apartment surrounded by things that finally belonged to her secondhand books. Yellow tulips from the corner bodega, mismatched mugs. There was peace here, but not the fragile kind she used to fake. This was peace built on choice. Her phone buzzed. A message from Rosa. "It's done." Later that day in Rosa's office, filled with the smell of coffee and worn paper, Valerie held the final court document in her hands. Evelyn Worthington under federal investigation. Foundation dissolved. Case closed. Rosa leaned back. "You were right," she said simply. Valerie exhaled, the kind of breath that emptied years. That night, she reread a line in her old journal. "If I disappear, no one will notice." She smiled softly. That girl didn't know. Outside, spring had begun. Trees stubbornly bloomed along cracked sidewalks. Valerie pulled on a jacket and walked not with a destination, but with presence. She passed the Worthington estate. Cameras were gone. Lights dimmed. It looked smaller now, like a hollow shell of curated perfection. She didn't stop. She didn't stare. But she smiled not because she won, but because she was free. A letter from Graham arrived a week later. Apologies laced in self-pity. Pages of if only. She didn't reply. Closure didn't need an audience. Instead, she started working part-time at a women's advocacy center. Filing intake forms. Listening. Writing again. One day, she opened her laptop and typed a new blog post, the first since it all began. Title: "They didn't bury me. They planted me." She hit publish, then shut the laptop. She made tea. The world didn't explode. It didn't need to, because sometimes justice is quiet. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is simply not disappear. Before her walk to the estate, Valerie visited the small park where she once sat with Graham on their third date. The memory was sharp, him making promises. He never kept her laughing at jokes that weren't funny. She sat on the same bench now, cracked and sun-faded, and realized she didn't miss him. She missed who she thought he could be. Across the street, two teenagers argued over ice cream flavors. One dropped their cone and burst into tears. The other handed over theirs without hesitation. Valerie watched them, strangely moved by the simplicity of kindness. No performance, no cost. Later, as she stood outside the Worthington gates, she traced the edges of the property with her eyes. The columns, the manicured hedges, the same stone path she once scrubbed wine from. A delivery truck honked behind her, jolting her from thought. The world moved on, and so did she. Back home, her inbox held a different kind of message, a note from Marla. "Thought you should know I got a job offer. Somewhere real. Thank you." Valerie replied, "You did that for yourself, but I'm proud of you." In her kitchen, Valerie cooked lentils and read poetry. There was no grand plan, no speech to write. Just dinner. Just quiet. That weekend, Rosa dropped by with a secondhand toaster and a hug that lingered. I meant what I said, Rosa told her. You changed more than your life. Valerie didn't argue. She didn't deflect. She just said, good. On Sunday, Valerie rearranged her bookshelf. Her wedding photo was gone, replaced with a print of a small plant growing through concrete. By Monday, the news had shifted. Another scandal, another headline. But strangers still left notes on her blog. Thank you for telling the truth. It made me brave. And Valerie, seated in the soft morning light of her apartment, no longer felt buried. She felt seen. She felt possible. That evening, she called her mother for the first time in months. They talked about nothing urgent recipes, the weather, and neighbor's new dog. But there was something gentle in her mother's voice this time. Less worry, more space. You sound different, her mother finally said. Lighter. I think I am, Valerie answered. I think I'm starting to believe I belong to myself. Before bed, she lit a candle and sat by the window. The city hummed outside taxis, arguments, laughter, all folding into the night. She let the noise wash over her like rain cleaning a street after a storm. When she finally turned off the light, the room didn't feel empty. It felt earned. And as Valerie drifted to sleep, she didn't dream of revenge. She dreamed of new things. Blank pages, open doors, a name spoken with pride, Valerie Hart. Whole, unhidden, free. Valerie publishes a blog post titled, They Didn't Bury Me. They planted me. They tried to silence her with shame, but their empire of secrets collapsed under the weight of one woman's truth. The Worthington name no longer stood untouchable, not after the courtroom lights, not after the cameras captured what silence once concealed. Justice didn't roar. It arrived steady, deliberate, like a storm that had been gathering for years. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. Sometimes it only takes one person refusing to vanish for the entire world to finally see.